Hi, folks. Today we're going to talk about something very rare. A man that I both respect and revere as a personal hero. Here on Lessons from the Purple Chair. Hey, folks. Welcome back to Lessons from the Purple Chair. One intellectual's musings from the comforts of a big purple wingback. I'm your host, Professor Timothy R. Crowe. You know, folks, I've been getting a lot of questions lately about who is your hero. Tim, who's your hero? And I'm like, I really had to think about it because I'm not really the hero type, the hero having type. It's just not my, it's just not my forte. But when I think about when I think about heroes and who people regard as heroic, who people look as a personal role model, it's really a generational thing. If you go back to my parents, I'm Generation X, so you go back to the baby boomer generation of my parents. They idolized and they saw as heroes the great singer songwriters. People who were trying to stick it to the man and try and get revolution going and social change and counterculture and bring about peace in this world. That's what they respected. But now you jump ahead to other generations. You get uh, sports. Sports idols have always been big heroes, whether it be from basketball or especially with football. And but with generation um, with the millennials and Generation Z, they're what they idolize is what comes in their culture, and their culture is very much a social media culture. And being a social media culture, what they respect is money and fame and materialism. It's a very materialistic, shallow outlook, and it kind of reflects in who they hold up as icons or heroes. It's people that all have show but no substance. Uh, you have between um, idiotic rap artists who never want to shut their stupid mouths, um, or you get the really wealthy and flamboyant and boasting and out there, or you get the influencers out there, whatever an influencer is. And for most of what I've seen of influencers, they need to stop trying to influence. It's usually very shallow, materialistic showmanship and popularity crap. So I really don't hold those people in any type of esteem. And then you also get into what kind of comes with the influencer thing. You get people who are famous for being famous. Um, there's a family of women out there. They're very good looking. They're mostly just TNA, and really that's the only talent they have. That and marrying horrible celebrities who are also horrid. As you can see, I'm not a big fan, and I find no heroism, an example in any of that. And really, that's what a hero is supposed to be: is an example to people. Uh, a standard that you can reach for, even if they set a bar too high for most people to reach. That's a hero. Um, and for me, that is something that is rarely achieved. Now, like a lot of people, I admire certain people from history. However, as far as what I would consider a hero, to me, a hero is someone who stands up for what they believe in, stands up for their virtues, their dignity, above all other considerations, but beyond peers, beyond history, beyond any type of other influence. But they literally feel that they're right, and they are willing to fight and sacrifice to make their rights reality, and even to the point of a self-sacrifice. And that's the people that I respect. And one of the biggest ones is a 26-year-old gentleman that I can pretty much guarantee you most have never heard of. Of course, I'm talking about Jonathan Daniels. And I want to talk about Jonathan Daniels because he is one of the few people that I both respect and revere and would consider an example to try and live up to and a hero. So let's start off with a little bit of biography. Jonathan Merrick Daniels was born March 20th, 1939 in Keene, New Hampshire. He was the son of Philip Daniels and his wife Constantine or Constance Weaver. He was actually a very astute and very intelligent young boy and very athletic. Um, and he actually joined the Episcopal Church when he was in high school. He went on to join the Virginia Military Institute, where he did most of his education, and he actually graduated valedictorian of his class. In 1961, he actually attended Harvard University, where he was majoring in English literature. And around about 1962, he started feeling, around Easter, he started feeling the pull of the church and his devotions, and he decided to seek ordination as an Episcopal priest. So he enrolled in the Theological Episcopal School, and which he was expected in 1963, and he was expected to graduate, become a priest in 1966 from that seminary. Um, Also during this time, around about early in 1965, he got the call from Martin Luther King Jr., like a lot of college people and young preachers, um, to join him in the civil rights movement, particularly on his march in Selma, Alabama, and doing work in Alabama to get people registered to getting African American people registered to vote. And Daniels, this was right up his alley. So off he went. He was at Selma, and actually during that trip, he and a partner missed the bus, and they decided there that it was kind of their destiny or they felt the pull to stay and keep doing work. So they actually contacted the seminary and said, "Can we stay here, keep doing this work, and we'll study and all that while we're here, and just come back to take our finals." And they agreed to that. So um, uh, uh, Jonathan and a couple of friends, they stayed behind, and Jonathan ended up living with the West family, an African American family in a very poor region of Alabama. And Jonathan did what priests do. He wasn't a priest yet, but he did what holy people do. He worked with the African American children. He taught them to read. He taught grown people to read. He got people registered to vote. He helped people to set up funds and fill out forms to get additional funds for charity funds for where they were poor. And he also started segregating. I mean, not segregating, but integrating the local Episcopal Church, which apparently was not looked well upon, but he didn't care. He kept doing it. He seemed to be a very caring young man, though a little bit mischievous at times. Um, so what finally ended up happening was in August 14th, yeah, 1965. He was part of a picketing group, a protesting picketing group. They were picketing this town for having only all-white shopping center, and they got arrested for this. 29 protesters got arrested, and they hauled them to the Haynesville jail in Haynesville, Alabama, and they took them there in a garbage truck. They ended up staying in a jail that had no air conditioning, and this was August in the Alabama heat. got very little water, very little food, and they let the five juveniles go the next day, but they refused to allow anyone else to bail out unless they could all bail out. Well, after being there in jail in that heat without appropriate amounts of water and food, they finally let them all out um, on August 20th, 1965. The minute they got out, and they're stating they called for transport, Jonathan, along with three others, a Catholic priest named Richard Morrisseau, and two African American teenage girls, Ruby Sales and Joyce Bailey. They went down the road to a store. This was Varner's cash store, and it was one of the few stores in the area that would allow African Americans to enter. But when they got there, they were confronted by an armed gunman. This gentleman is a very short way to put it, named Tom Coleman, was standing there with a shotgun and a pistol in his holster, and barring them from the door. Now he worked for the roadway, and he had been a part-time sworn-in deputy, even though it's not clear he was sworn in at this time. And by the way, this all does look like a setup. Um, but he barred them from coming in, and uh, it, finally, according to Ruby Sales, the 17-year-old that was with them, he pointed the gun at her and he said, "Bitch, I'll blow your head off." At that point, he already took aim at her with his shotgun. Jonathan Daniels stepped forward, pushed Ruby Sales out of the way, pushed her down. She fell down. He pushed her out of the way and threw himself in front of it and took the full blast of the shotgun. It struck him dead in the chest and killed him instantly. Ruby Sales, of course, when she heard the gun go off, she thought she was shot. She was in shock. And when she realized what was going on, she jumped up and started running. Um, and by this time, Richard Morrisseau had grabbed the hand of Joyce Bailey, and they were running. Um, and Tom Coleman, still standing there with his double barrel shotgun, I'd already shot one barrel and killed Jonathan Daniels. He aimed it at Richard Morrisseau and shot him in the back as he was running away. Real champion here. And he was very critically injured. Uh, he then ended up calling on his radio saying, "I have just shot two preachers." Well, this this was a very heroic moment, and one that it actually kind of chokes me up to think about it. This man knew that he was going to die, and he made the sacrifice to save this young African American girl from dying. He threw himself in front of a shotgun held by a bigoted idiot. Well, after the killing, the murder of Jonathan Daniels, Tom Coleman was brought up on charges. They actually charged him with manslaughter, even though he should have been charged with first degree murder. And and he went to trial. And when he went to trial, the judge refused to wait for Richard Morrisseau, who had survived from this gunshot to the back and was in the hospital. He refused to wait or for him to come to get well enough to come in and give testimony. So they and Tom Coleman made a claim of self-defense against two preachers and two teenage girls. None of the four of them were armed with a thing. They had no weapons whatsoever, made no threats. But he claimed self-defense. And in that time of the South, with an all white jury because they had disenfranchised the African Americans from being on the jury. Uh, uh, Jury nullification. They acquitted him. He was found not guilty. Um, Tom Coleman lived on and died at the age of 86 in 1997. But however, even though of the injustice that Jonathan Daniels had in the courts, in society, he was very justified because after the word of this young preacher or priest, most of them thought he was a priest, even though technically he wasn't a priest yet. Um, to die for this African American girl, this act of bravery, really lit the lamp under the Episcopal Church in Alabama. They really started pushing for civil rights. Once this was broadcast, even Martin Luther King said it was the bravest sacrifice that he'd ever seen from a Christian. Uh, that it really ramped up and boosted the civil rights movement. And of course, as we know, it was successful. African Americans earned the right to vote. Uh, the resistance against them just started failing and falling apart. And of course, then we get the world we are today, which is far from perfect, as I know, but at least African Americans are free to vote and they're not having to deal with segregation, even in the deepest part of the South. And really, we can owe a small part of that to Jonathan Daniels. So after all this, Jonathan Daniels was held to be a Christian martyr who died for a very worthy cause. He was seen he made the ultimate Christian sacrifice of martyring himself for another human being. Uh, Ruby Sales, the young woman that he had saved, she went on. She actually attended the same seminary. I don't think she never did get ordained, but she started working for civil rights advocacies in Washington D.C. and she still does talks. She actually opened um, uh, uh, a a street service for people, an inner city service that she named after Jonathan Daniels. And as far as the history with Jonathan Daniels, in 1991, the Episcopal Church designated him as an official martyr. He was given the feast day of August 14th, the same day that he was arrested. Um, they're there in Alabama. They do a pilgrimage march every year to that store where he was shot and died. They perform. They have speeches. In fact, it's not just for him; it's for all those that they lost in the civil rights movement. They do speeches and they usually perform the Eucharist. Jonathan Daniels. There's several schools in the state in Keene, New Hampshire, that are now named after him. Um, he was actually included in the Southern Poverty, the Southern, what is it? um, the the Southern Poverty Law Center's Memorial Park. He is featured there. Um, he also in the National Cathedral in Washington D.C. Washington National Cathedral. His They sculpted his head in stone, and it can be seen there in the church, in the cathedral. Also, there are several, one in Texas I know of, several stained glass windows that feature Jonathan Daniels as the martyr that he truly was. Um, so when people ask me, who do I see as a hero? I always say Jonathan Daniels because this man fought for what was right. He fought he fought to take down an institutional evil, and he did it through the righteous power of God. He felt God was on his side, and through teaching children to read, through to helping people get signed up to vote, to helping people get charity money to uplift their lives, and finally to save a 17-year-old girl from a bigot with a gun. He gave his own life for what he believed. Now, I would ask all of those that idolize Kanye West and Tupac Shakur, and would they have thrown themselves in front of that gun? Would you have thrown yourself in front of that gun, knowing that you're going to die? Would any of your heroes have done that? Well, mine did. He took the ultimate step that I don't think that I could take. That's the reason he's my hero. He went above and beyond and sacrificed what I think I could ever do. And I try to live by that example, to give all that I have, perhaps even to the point of personal sacrifice, if it comes to it. I hope I have as much courage as Jonathan Daniels. Well, that's all I've got today, folks, for this episode of Lessons from the Purple Chair, talking about the saint. And yes, I do say the saint, Jonathan Daniels, because this is a man that fought an institutional evil and actually gave up his life, sacrificed himself for another human being. And he did. And when you do something like that, you are up in the high country. So, so that's my hero. So, which makes me wonder, who is your hero? And speaking of that, please, before if you haven't already joined, please reach down and hit that purple chair and give me and subscribe. Also, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them forward. I'd love to hear from you. Um, and remember, and always remember, find yourself a good book, find yourself a comfy chair, and pursue your passion. Later.